Good morning to everyone here, and also a very warm welcome to this uh, TED Talk. For those of you who are familiar with TREDS, which is a group at Center for Policy Research, which is about, the acronym goes by Transboundary Rivers, Ecologies, and Development Studies. These talks are organized under the aegis of CPR CWC Dialogue Forum, which is Center for Policy Research, and Central Water Commission Dialogue Forum, which is a forum that is nurtured by the Ministry of Jal Shakti Research Chair that is established by the Ministry of Jal Shakti at the Center for Policy Research. For further details, you can actually look up the cprindia.org website to know more about our activities and these talks as well. I just wanted to get started with basically saying that acknowledging, and most of you might be aware of it, that today is World Water Day. And it was with that kind of, understanding that we thought about organizing this talk, but also with a kind of, realization of the risk that there will be plenty of events of this kind on this day. But then we thought we should also contribute to this discourse and then have this important talk. But there are also other reasons for it, because today's speaker, Mr. Nityanand Rai, has been asked to, he will be leading a team to visit the incident where this Chamoli flood has happened, and would be looking at reasons for for the event, and also to find other explanatory sort of uh, understanding for this particular incident. So his schedule, I think he's supposed to leave on the 24th, and we wanted to sort of have this interaction beforehand so that he can share with us his plans to look at this incident, and how he's looking at the way the incident in terms of building resilience for this incident itself. He would share his plans with us. But I just wanted to also let you know that it's quite nice to have, we have had 55 registrations for this talk. And it's quite nice to have it because this is 11 o'clock on a Monday, and that too on this day of Water Day. Uh, I'm sure those people who are interested in this topic would have other kind of commitments or otherwise obligations. Yet we have fairly good number of registrations. I also came to know, in fact, day before yesterday, and it was confirmed yesterday, that there is a very important event today that's happening, which is actually one of those rare instances of interstate agreements, at least in these times, between Madhya Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh over implementation of this Ken-Betwa link, part of this interlinking project. And this is going to be signed today. The memorandum of agreement will be signed today between the two chief ministers of Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh at, I think, at 11:30, in the presence of, in the virtual presence of the Prime Minister and the Minister for Jal Shakti. So that is another reason you may not find several, registrations translating into attendance, partly because several of those CWC officers, Central Water Commission officers, who usually join these talks, we may not find them because they've been asked to join this event. So even then, I mean, I think we wanted to make sure that this conversation happens, and then we would also put out this recording for others to view at a later point of time. This is an important conversation because these are the kind of new risks that we are going to face in the coming days. The way these uncertainties around the way climate change impacts hydrological regimes, and how they translate into these kind of events, is something that is necessary for us to start acknowledging, and also start thinking about how do we build resilience around it. So I have a great pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Mr. Nityanand Roy, who is a director at the Central Water Commission and looking after hydrology related, which is primarily hydrological and hydrodynamic modeling, as I understand. And he's someone whom I knew for a long time, and I have had the benefit of a great deal of learning from him through the interactions that we have had on several occasions, particularly after the Kerala floods, if I recall right. And Mr. Nityanand Roy is a civil engineer. He's a CWES officer, and he has got his MTech from IIT Kharagpur. And he's someone who's received a Vice Chancellor's Gold Medal from the Awadh University, and also a meritorial award from the Central Water Commission. And he's someone who is known for his expertise in advanced hydrological modeling within the Central Water Commission circles. And he's someone who has, over the past more than 20 years, he has had a chance to, and also he has proved his expertise by his familiarity of more than 300 river valleys within the country. So you're looking at someone who has hands-on practical understanding of hydrology within India and also the river valleys in India. And he's someone who has produced those internal reports that are often put out by the Central Water Commission whenever these kind of events, including the Kedarnath floods in 2013, the Jammu and Kashmir floods in 2014, and the Kerala floods in 2018. So, I mean, you can't think about any better person to talk about this particular incident that happened in Chamoli on February 7th, 2021. So we thought we would like to thank him for actually making time to give this talk at this point of time when he's preparing for this important visit to this location. I would like to sort of invite him to give his presentation. The basic rules are like this, as some of you might be knowing, is that we will be giving about 40 to 45 minutes for the speaker, and then after that we will open for discussion. So the simple ground rule here is that please, any questions that you want to put in for the speaker, please put them there in the Q&A space, and then you're also encouraged to share information or add information that you think is relevant, that you are familiar with, in the chat box for people to look at, and you can also engage in a parallel conversation if you wish to. But please keep the Q&A space exclusively for the questions that you would like to pose for the speaker. So with that, I invite Mr. Nityanand Roy to share his thoughts around the Chamoli incident.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Srinivas. First of all, my sincere thanks to Center for Policy Research for giving me this opportunity to speak on the subject of flash flood and GLOW. And this is a really very interesting topic. So I have covered a number of actual case histories also in my presentation. So I'm going to start that presentation. Good morning to everybody. I am NN Rai. I am Director Hydrology in Central Water Commission, and today I'm going to make a presentation on Chamoli flood and how can we build resilience. So in this presentation, I am not covering only Chamoli flood, but I would also discussing a very important topic, that is the Glacier Lake outburst flood, because Chamoli flood was one unique type of phenomena, but most of the such type of phenomena which we are observing, that is due to glacial lake outburst type of incidents. This Chamoli phenomena, this was basically a glacier surge, and This also resulted a very severe flash flood. This flood we can compare with the floods which we normally observe during the glacial lake outburst. So such type of floods have some unique characteristics than the normal floods. Those unique characteristics I am going to explain in my this talk. Uh, if we are able to estimate these such type of floods in advance, then it is possible to plan suitable resilient river valley projects, and also we can provide or we can plan the some hooter arrangement and such type of things, which by which we can certainly mitigate the adverse impact of these such type of floods. Though complete avoiding such floods are not possible, but yes, mitigating the adverse impact of such type of floods is possible. So let us start with glacier and glacial lakes. We all know that basically this is in Himalayan context. We, especially in India and some other countries in Southeast Asia, these glaciers are the vast resource of water. However, the glacial lakes formation at the glacier snout, what you are seeing, this is the part of the snout. ये visible होगा ना? Yes. This is the part of glacial snout, and so the glacial lakes which have formed on the snout of the glacier, those are really a cause of concern, and we normally consider such type of glacial lake a potentially dangerous glacial lake. During the glacier shrinkage of the 20th century, dangerous glacial lakes developed, particularly behind the moraines. That I will explain you what is the moraine, and this is a continuous type of phenomena. It is not that some glacial lake which has developed, it will breach and again you can relax. No, it is a cyclic type of process. So these things can go on. So the major concern is that these glacial lakes, which are formed or which are also in the process of formation, they are increasing in size due to accumulation of the glacier belt. And when the water level in these glacial lakes increases over a certain threshold limit, then its bursting generally occurs. The impact of these glacial lakes due to their outbursts, that we generally call the glacial lake outburst flood. Some of the recorded GLOF events are there, like in Bhutan in early 1940s, 1957, 1960, 1969, and 1994. 1994 was a very severe GLOF event in that one very big glacial lake that is known as Luge Glacial Lake that was breached. In India, first lake outburst flood which we experienced, that was in year 2005. That I was also involved in estimating that flood, because there was a lot of concern in Himachal Pradesh. The media was telling that due to this glacial lake outburst, flood will be something around 100 feet or 200 feet high. Then we estimated the entire phenomena, and we were able to give a very good forecast along with NDMA, and accept the damage of few bridges which we cannot avoid. The rest of the things, rest of the flood was handled by the projects like Nathpa Zakri, etc. very smoothly. Then another sudden outburst occurred in Kedarnath during year 2013. That was the Chorabari glacial outbursts, and it was very unfortunate incident in which more than 5,000 people died, and it was really a concern uh, for entire India. Then another important event which occurred, that is the Chamoli glacier surge in February, 7th February on 7th February 2021. And if we see whatever these flood events, or what I am discussing in year 2005 or 2013 or 2021, so uh, in these floods, like especially in year 2013 and 2021, that invaluable loss of human lives that occurred. And apart from that, from infrastructure point of view, there was significant damage to roads, bridges, and power projects in all these floods. Regarding why such incidents are occurring, or why we are expecting that in future such incidents may occur more frequently. So number of studies have been carried out, and one very important study has been carried out by ICMOD. And what ICMOD findings are, uh, their estimate is like that the sequel of global warming causing glaciers to retreat in many mountain regions. Here, I would like to explain that glaciers are very sensitive to the temperature rise. A slight increase in temperature, even 0.2 degrees centigrade or 0.4 degrees centigrade or 0.5 degrees centigrade, that is going to have a significant impact or effect on the glaciarized snow mass. So if we consider it geologically, then during the little ice age, which we normally assume from 1550 AD to 1850 AD, many glaciers were longer than today. What we are seeing today, most of the glaciers were longer than the today. And glacier is basically a moving mass of ice. Glacier is not a stationary type of thing. If glacier becomes stationary, then that is called as dead ice. It means glacier is a moving mass of ice, and when a moving mass of ice is passing or moving through a valley, then it is also eroding the valley material, because you can imagine what is some 30-meter, 40-meter thick glacier, and if it is moving along the valley, then it is certainly going to erode a lot of the valley material, and this valley material get accumulated at the terminal point of the glacier, and that is called a moraine. And when these uh, glacier tips are coming below a particular elevation, say something around 3,500 meter or 3,600 meter, or maybe below 4,000 meter, then due to temperature difference, whatever the heat they are getting there, melting also starts. So during the melting process of the glacier, whatever the material is there inside the even glacier mass, that also comes there along with the water, and it get accumulated near the moraine. That is basically called a till, and so such type of dam formation take place, and water is getting collected behind these moraine dam, and this is called basically glacial lake. So overtopping and breaching of the dam by waves generated by avalanches or glacier calving in most is that is the most common failure mechanism, because glacier calving is also one of the very important phenomena regarding the glacial lake outburst flood, because this glacial lake water will be in contact with the glacier near its snout. So what will happen over a period of time, when this water will start calving that glacier, and in few years a certain mass of the glacier will act as a cantilever, and it will simply break, and then it will create a big splash inside the lake, and creating a surge wave and overtoppling of the dam or washing out the all the moraine dam. So that is another very important aspect, that snow avalanche. Snow avalanche, because in such type of terrain, snowfall is a regular phenomena, and when they also this snow is not able to sustain beyond a particular threshold slope, then avalanche take place, and if the avalanche is coming inside the lake, then all of the water will get splashed, and all these this your moraine dam will get washed away. So that is the reason of the glacial lake outburst flood. The sudden failure of the moraine dam on a glacial lake can release a very large amount of water called a glacial lake outburst flood, because depending upon the size of the glacial lake, the volume may vary from 2 mcm, 5 mcm, or it may be even up to 60 mcm or 100 mcm. So some of the glacial lake, like some of the glacial lake in Nepal, like Sor Alpha Glacial Lake, and even one of the very famous glacial lake in Sikkim area, that is the Lona Glacial Lake, they are having the huge volume, that is would be more than 40 to 60 mcm volume. So now this outburst flood peak due to these glacial lake or moraine dam, it will depend upon the lake volume. If the lake volume is significant, then we can expect that your flood peak will be quite high. Then what is the dam height? The dam height and width of the moraine dam. Then dam material composition. Dam material composition, this will be a totally uncompacted material, and this is basically moraine. So it's breaching. Once the breaching will start, of that complete breaching, a breach formation will get over within say 15 to 30 minutes only. It is not like normal earthen dam, where because these normal earthen dams are man-made earthen dams are well compacted, and they have very less permeability. So their breaching phenomena, once it starts, it may take 2 to 3 hours or even 6 hours, depending upon the dam. But in the case of this moraine dam, this breaching phenomena may take in 15 to 30 minutes. And because of this small breach development time, here the peak will be very uh, will be having a very steep rise. Means it will have a very significant volume with a small time base. So another thing, it is depends upon the failure mechanism. Like if suppose your glow phenomena is occurring due to calving of the glacier. Suppose some glacier is also buried below the your moraine dam. It if that calving is taking place, then we can expect that due to these such type of calving, some small amount of glow flood we can expect. Then downstream topography. What type of valley is there in the downstream? If it is a very wide valley, then the attenuation of the glow flood will be very fast. If it is a very narrow valley, very steep slope, then attenuation we can expect that will be very less. Now, before going to the actual phenomena of the globe, let us understand different type of glacial lakes. Uh, Always this glacial lake, most of the glacial lake phenomena starts on the top of the glacier itself. On the top of the glacier, now what you are seeing here in two photographs, we are seeing some ponds on the top of the glacier itself. So these ponds are basically called the supraglacial lake. Supraglacial lake means the lake formation on the top of the glacier. Now, over a period of time, uh, first there will be some small ponds at the different locations on the surface of the glacier. But over a period of time, these ponds will get connected when their size will increase. Then a big glacial lake that is formed, that is called the Moraine Dam Glacial Lake, like what you are seeing here. I have shown one Rafstranj Glacial Lake of the Bhutan. This is in the Lunana area of the Bhutan. And that you are seeing now, this glacial lake formation has taken place completely. But here in another, that what you are seeing here, that is the Tharthormi Glacier. On Tharthormi Glacier, the glacial lake formation is still taking place. So that over a period of time, again, this glacial lake will combine, and yet then its shape will be just like what you are seeing for the Rafstranj Glacial Lake. Another type of glacial lake is the Sairak Lake, like Changu Lake in Sikkim. Most of the people must have visited who have ever gone to Nathula Pass. Nathula Pass. That is Changu Lake. That is a basically Sairak type of glacial lake. So a Sairak type of glacial lake that is formed. Suppose some glacier was there, a small glacier was there, one isolated glacier was there at say in the some some 300 or 400 years before. Over a period of time, because of the number of reasons, atmospheric reason due to change in the temperature, that glacier has melted, and at that location now the water has got accumulated. So such type of glacial lakes are called as the Cyrac Lake. Normally, Cyrac Lake have very minimum chances of the glow. So such type of glacial, Cyrac type of glacial lakes are mostly stable in nature. Then what you can see here, number of the Cyrac lake in the this Tibet region, basically in the Lohit basin. There are a number, hundred of Cyrac lakes are there like that. Now let us consider a case. I'm showing you the case of this Lunana region of Bhutan, because for this Puna Sangchu project of the Bhutan, that globe estimation was carried out by me. That was my first globe estimation. So I carried out a lot of study of that region. So what you are seeing, there are two satellite imageries. This is one is of year 1993, and another is of year 1994. So in this, what you are seeing in 1993, this one lake, this is the Rafstenge Glacial Lake, that is quite fully developed. And in 1993, there was hardly any glacial lake formation on the Tharthormi Glacier. And in 1994 imagery, now we can see some small lake formation on the Tharthormi Glacier itself. And another fully developed lake, that is the this Luge Lake, which busted number of times in the past, and now they have Bhutan government has tried to stabilize this lake, but still that phenomena of globe cannot be ruled out from this glacial lake. Now again you compare this 1994 imagery with 2007 imagery. In 1993, especially you see this Tharthormi Glacier, and Tharthormi Glacier, very few small glacial lakes were there, but by year 2007, that those small glacial lakes have combined, and now they have taken a big shape of a glacial lake. So this is the phenomenon, how these glacial lakes develop over a period of time. This what you are seeing, this is the photograph of the snout of the Rafstenge Glacier, and this is the Rafstenge Glacial Lake. These are two photographs from which we can understand what are these glacial lakes. And another important glacial lake, that is a very big glacial lake, that is in the Tista Basin, that is the Lonak Glacial Lake. And what you are seeing, this glacial lake is located here. This is the South Lonak Glacial Lake, and you are seeing here, this is the photograph. This is the on Google Earth how you can see this glacial lake. So this is the Lonak Glacier, and this is these are the two photographs of this Lonak Glacial Lake. This is also very big size of glacial lake. It is being monitored, and now government of Sikkim, they have with the help of DST, they have put up one water level sensor recorder, also water level recorder sensor here on this Lonak Glacial Lake. And CWC had carried out the globe study also, and we had communicated our result to government of Sikkim, because this is a really very potentially dangerous glacial lake. Then in Siang Basin, like in northeastern region, like in Siang Basin, number of glacial lakes are there in the Tibet area. In the Siang Basin itself, what for the Siang, when this river valley projects, when their DPR was submitted in Center Water Commission, then we had told them to carry out the globe study also, and number of glacial lakes were considered, and based on the criticality analysis, they finalized the globe estimation parameter. So like these are the few of the glacial lakes in the Siang Basin. Then in Lohit Basin, around 269 glacial lakes, because this inventory was prepared. In Center Water Commission, we have got the inventory prepared for the most of the glacial lakes. And out of these, in Lohit Basin also, because a number of projects were coming, hydroelectric projects were coming. So in that also, the detailed globe estimation was carried out by these developers also. So out of this 269 glacial lake, 35 glacial lakes which were considered that may create the glacial lake outburst flood in the future. And this is the one estimate of the Lohit globe which was carried out. And what you are seeing that here the at the location of the glacier lake, the flood peak may be of the order of 9,000 cubic, but as it goes downstream, something around 140 kilometer, 160 kilometer, 180 kilometer, because these were the locations where the projects were planned. So here the peak is of the order of 2,800 cubic. So we can see how much attenuation means, some 9,000 or 9,200 cubic flood if it is traveling along the river downstream of the glacial lake for about 100 kilometer or 120 kilometer, then a significant attenuation take place. Then in Tista Basin, this ISOMOD has also prepared, Sirabusi is also having this inventory of the glacial lake, and ISOMOD also prepared this inventory of glacial lake. ISOMOD have categorized 14 glacial lakes in that area as a potentially dangerous glacial lakes. Out of that, 2 lakes are having the area more than 100 hectares. So these are some of the potentially dangerous glacial lakes in the Tista Basin. What you are seeing, these are the Google Earth imageries of these potentially dangerous glacial lake. Same thing what we have observed in the Subansiri also, in basin, in the upper Subansiri, basically all these area in the Tibet area, number of glacial lakes, what you are seeing through dot, 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 all these are the location of the glacial lakes. So for this also, when the projects were submitted, global study was carried out. So these are the some of the glacial lakes. What you are seeing that one of the glacial lake, its area was 42 hectares, and from 2006 to 2010, when we compared with the time series of the satellite imageries, then its surface area will increase by 22%. How this Moran glacial lake formation take place? Now, what you are seeing through this sketch, I will just like to explain that this is the glacier mass. Glacier is just a moving mass of ice. When the glacier is moving in the downstream or is moving along the valley, then it is eroding all the valley material. And what you are seeing here, this is the moraine material which is getting accumulated on the tip of the glacier. Okay. Now, when this glacier tip is reaching below, like I have already explained, below a certain elevation, then the melting is also taking place. And since already moraine is there, so whatever the melt water is there, it is get accumulated behind this dam. So this way, these glacial lakes are getting formed. Now, one important aspect of this is that the Moraine Dam glacial lakes, which are still in contact or very near to the glacier, are usually dangerous. It's one of the major reason of that is that calving of the glacier, due to which some portion will come into the lake and creating a surge wave and then washing out the moraine material. That is one of the basic thing which I would like to mention here. Then certain facts about the Moraine Dam glacial lake. Most of the Moraine Dam and Moraine Dam glacial lakes have a history of cyclic outburst activity, like I have already told you in the regarding the Luge Lake. That is a well documented case that this Luge Lake had already outbursted 3 times in the past. Its last outburst happened in year 1994. So most of the glacial lakes, Moraine Dam glacial lakes, they will have a cyclic outburst activity, and once some water has gone out of the glacial lake, again that formation may take place and they can again outburst in the future. Then as glacier retreats, the cyclic outburst activity may travel up to newly formed Moraine Dam location and Moraine Dam lake. Then the cyclic outburst activity ends when the Moraine Dam is damaged by the outburst floods to the point that it can no longer hold the water. Means if there is no certain height is not available at the Moraine Dam location, then it won't be able to hold the water. And at that time we can expect, yes, now this glacial lake is not going to create any further outburst flood. Then for estimating the glacial lake outburst flood at any location, here I am mentioning about the water resources project because for river valley projects, as per Sirabusi guidelines, this has to be carried out if these projects are coming in those regions where these glacial lakes are present. So because whenever we are going for the any growth study, so you have to first map the catchment area, then you have to see how many glacial lakes are there in the catchment area, and there may be hundred of glacial lakes. So we are not going to go do the simulation for each and every glacial lake. So what we have to do first, we have to prepare the inventory of the glacial lakes in the project catchment. Then we have to see which are the potentially dangerous glacial lake, and that parameter I have already told you what you have to see which are the glacial lakes which are in contact with the snout of the glacier, and which are the glacial there may be certain number of glacial lakes which may be of the Cyrac type of glacial lake. So generally we don't consider the Cyrac type of glacial lake. So mostly we consider the moraine type of glacial lakes which are existing there at the end of the glacier. So then uh, we prepare first, we have to prepare the inventory, and then you have to go for a criticality analysis. For the criticality analysis, you have to see what is the distance of that glacial lake from that particular project location. Then you have to see what is the average slope of the river from that for that reach of the river. So all these parameters we have to see, and another important parameter, what is the size of the lake. So this is a very important parameter. So based on all these parameters, we go for the detailed criticality analysis, and based on that criticality analysis, then we finalize whether these two glacial lakes or three glacial lakes should be considered for the globe estimation. Then when while analyzing all these phenomena, we have to also observe whether there is any possible combination of these glacial lake is possible in future or not. If that is also, there is some possibility of that type of phenomena also, then that thing we also have to consider in our study. Then once you have prepared the inventory, and you have to then estimate the lake water spread area and its volume, and finalize the glacial lakes for the globe simulation. Uh, Estimate the breach parameter for the Moran Dam, and simulate the dam breach flood using any mathematical model. Normally we are using Mike 1 or HECRAS. HECRAS is a free software, so that is easily available. Then once you have got the dam break flood, then you have to channel route that dam break flood to desired project location, or to at any desired location, to know, even suppose someone planning some bridge, then at bridge location will be the point of interest, and at that bridge location, how much flow you are expected, or you are expecting. Up to that point, you have to channel route this glow flood. Region for the Moraine Dam glacial lake failures. These are the important region. One, melting of the ice core, that impervious core, ice core within the Moraine Dam melts, lowering the effective height of the dam. This is one of the very important phenomena, because between the Moraine Dam there may be number of ice crystals formation, and when these ice crystals are just melting, then subsidence of Moraine Dam will take place, and that may result breaching of the Moraine Dam. Then overtopping by the displacement wave, if some thing has fallen, some rock has fallen inside the lake, then it will create a surge wave, and that may cause the overtopping of the Moraine Dam. That is one of the phenomena. Then settlement, because of earthquake also, earthquake shocks can cause settlement of the moraine, reducing the freeboard and causing the overtoppling of the Moraine Dam. Then subglacial drainage, this volume of the melt water within the lake increase, that a point that the formerly grounded glacier flows causing an instantaneous subglacial drainage. This can destroy any Moraine Dam. So this is also one of the phenomena. If you see the region of the globe, then this was analyzed from the number of globe events in Nepal, and what it has been found that snow avalanche is about causing about 75% glacial lakes globe floods are due to snow avalanche. Then ice core moraine collapse due to melting of the ice core, about 10% of the total globe event. Then ice core moraine collapse due to seepage, that is also about 10%, and rock avalanche another 5%. So what we see that major cause of the globe is the snow avalanche. Even if you see this Chamoli incident, the glacier surge and snow avalanche, both were responsible for that. This is the Luge Glacier Lake outburst of in 1994. Here, what is the important aspect of the glow flood is the very high peak, which travels with a very high velocity. And with such type of flood, a lot of sediment load you can expect. This may be of the order of 30,000 ppm to 80,000 ppm. And in normal flood in Himalayas, your sediment load may be of the order of 2,000 ppm to 5,000 ppm. But in the globe, your sediment load will be 30,000 to 80,000. Keep this thing in mind. And that type of flood is going to kill the ponds of any run of the river scheme of the hydropower. And because of the high velocity, such type of flood are resulting the washing out of the deck of the bridges. That is another very third very important aspect of these floods. Because of very high sediment load they are having and high velocity, such type of flood is having a very strong abrasive power. Okay, so whenever we are designing or thinking about the resilience with such floods, so from a structural consideration point of view, you have to consider these three characteristic property of such flood while designing your structure. Now you see the Chorabari Glacier Lake outburst flood in Kedarnath. Here, this when we estimated this flood peak was of the order of 12,000 cubic, but the important part was the velocity. The velocity was of the order of 9 to 10 meter per second, and the rise of the water level due to this glow in the Kedarnath area was something around 4.5 to 5 meter. Now you can imagine 4.5 to 5 meter water wave which had passed within few minutes. And what is the impact of velocity of 9 to 10 meter per second? That is very important to understand. A healthy person cannot stand in a even in a knee deep water if the velocity is of the order of 4.5 meter per second. So you can imagine what can this 9 to 10 meter per second velocity can do in the case of this flash flooding. So that is the because of this high velocity, these floods are having a very significant destructive power. And what you can see the images of even Kedarnath complex, temple complex, what are before and what happened after these flood, and you can see even the sediment load, how much sediment load is there. And in the river also, and because of velocity, if you see how many this flood resulted a lot of this destruction of the roads and bridges. So that is the from these photographs are explaining how destructive such type of events can be. Now this is the another important this very unfortunate event, that is the Rishi-Ganga glacier surge flood which occurred on 7th February 2021. Its exact findings are still to be known. I am a part of that committee and number of departments we are working together. Uh, but from the preliminary findings or for the preliminary estimate, what we can find out, what you are seeing here, this one glacier is here, and from this glacier some crack was there in this glacier, and about some 800 meter length of the glacier with the width of about 500 meter, this got detached from its mother glacier, and then it's travel along this valley, and this is your Rangti Nala. It traveled along the Rangti Nala, and this Rangti Nala joins the Rishi Ganga river here, where one this landslide dam formation has taken place, and one lake is has formed there. We have analyzed that lake impact also, and it traveled all along this Rangit Nala, then Rishi Ganga, and then Dhauli Ganga river for about 24 kilometer. And what you see here, This landslide and the glacier surge started at an elevation of something around 5600 meter, and finally it has gone up to something around 2000 meter. So from 5600 to 2000 meter, this elevation drop is something around 2600 meter now. And if you see how much temperature difference that will occur, around, if we consider 7 degrees centigrade per 1000 meter height, that lapse rate, then the difference will be of the order of something around 18 to 20 degrees centigrade. Now, that is one of the aspect. Because of the elevation difference, this whatever the sudden change in the temperature is occurring. Another thing, the this glacier mass, along with eroded material of the valley floor, it travels something around 24 kilometers along the river reach. And you can imagine the velocity maybe, just you calculate, it will start from 100 meter per second, then it will go something around 40-30 meter per second. And just if you calculate how much friction heat it can generate, okay, so that friction generate that thermal shock, that cause the melting of entire glacier mass, and whatever the snow was there within few minutes, resulting, that was because of this thermal shock. This thermal shock, or the because of this temperature, within few minutes, whole thing converted into the water and passed as a flash flood. And what you are seeing here, this is our gauge record at Josimat site. Within 45 minutes or 1 hour, this complete phenomena occurred, because just previous day gauge level was 1372, and at that day it increased up to 1388.5 or 1389. You can imagine, and within few hours, hardly in 1 hour, the whole phenomena occurred. Okay, so this was a very significant type of event, but the first time such type of event we have observed here.
Nityanand, just
Yes.
quickly, it's we have 5 minutes more.
Yeah.
I hope that you can wrap it up. But just quickly, I wanted to get a clarification here.
Yeah.
So these hydrographs that you are sharing here
Yeah.
at the project sites,
Yeah.
are those hydrographs produced before the event occurred as a kind of possible scenario, or otherwise it is post event?
No, other hydrographs, what I have shown you, that is the before the occurrence of the event, that is the estimated. And what I am showing this Joshimat, this is actually what happened there, because this is the water level. And from this water level, what we estimated, that the peak discharge was of the order of something around 1680 cubic, and the volume associated with this flood was something around 6 million cubic meter.
Right. I just wanted to get a sense that,
yeah.
So every project design
Yeah.
would actually look at this scenario of a possible GLOF incident.
Yeah.
And okay, so
yeah.
Right.
Now,
and, 5 minutes more.
Yeah. Oh, only how many? 5 minutes?
Yeah, 5 minutes, but you can take a few minutes.
Okay.
More, I'm sure. Yeah.
Okay. Now, because of this incident, if you're seeing here, this is the Rishiganga River. So whatever the valley material and whatever the what was there, it got deposited here on the confluence of Rishiganga and on the Nala. And due to that, what you are seeing, this lake formation has taken place. And we have estimated this lake breach phenomena also. And what we have found, if this landslide dam, if it get breached, then the peak will be of the order of something around 300 to 400 cubic, and the velocity will be of the order of 6 to 7 meter per second. So now, this is the sum of the facts about because now I'm having only 5 or 10 minutes, so I will go quickly about this, how this globe should be estimated. So I have just shown through this case study. This I have already discussed with you regarding the satellite imageries. So here what you are seeing, 3 glacial lakes. One is the Rafstenge Glacial Lake, one is Thormi Glacial Lake, and third is Luge Glacial Lake. So when we carried out a detailed criticality analysis, then in that what we have found how this area has increased over a period of time. So if you are seeing in 1993, what is in 1994, what is in 2007. So what we have seen here in 1994, Luge Glacial Lake was breached. So its earlier volume was 100, earlier area was 118 hectare, but it was got reduced to 96 hectare after breaching. But in year 2007, again you are seeing it has increased enormous in the size, and now the in year 2007 its surface area was 127 hectare. For Thormi, what you are seeing that 88 hectare it surface area was in year 2007. In year 1993 there was no glacial lake at that surface, but in year 1994 its area was 41 hectare. So how this has increased over a period of time. And Raften Glacial Lake, it is almost surface area is almost constant because it is a fully formed glacial lake. So how we can estimate, what is the methodology for estimating? So I will quickly cover that one. Like this is the Puna Sangchu river, and this river is formed by the confluence of two rivers. One is called the Phochu river. Phochu, Chu means river in Bhutan, so one is called Phochu, another is called Mochu. When both these rivers join at the junction point, that is called, that place is very a prominent place in Bhutan, that is called the Punakha, and one Jong is there. Monastery is very famous. Punakha Monastery is there, and this project is here further downstream of this Punakha. So this is 136-meter high concrete gravity dam, and it is 1200 megawatt. This is a mega project, and this probable maximum flood was estimated at 11,500 cubic. But apart from the probable maximum flood, because this area is having number of glacial lakes, so GLOF was also estimated. So these are the number of the glacial lakes in the catchment area. So all those inventories of these glacial lakes are available. So all these glacial lakes, what you are seeing, that what the potentially dangerous glacial lakes, these were identified, and this is their location, latitude, longitude, what is their elevation, this is mentioned here, what is the length of the lake, that is also, what is the width of the lake, that is also given here, what is the surface area, and what is the volume are we have estimated using some, because for the Bhutan glacial lakes some empirical relationship has been developed by the ICIMOD, and using those empirical relationships we have estimated this volume also, what is the volume in these glacial lakes. So after a detailed criticality analysis, what we have found that the combination of the lakes is possible here, because of what we have seen, this Raft Range and the Thorthormi are very close to each other. So over a period of time, if this Thorthormi glacial lake failure take place, then it will impact, the water will come into the Raft Range glacial lake also, and it will also get breached. So considering these aspects, we have considered 3 GLOF simulations, and this is the mathematical model setup on Mike 11. So these are the breach parameters which we have considered. So I will not going to discuss, because otherwise it will be too much engineering, but we have to consider certain breach width, and there are governing criteria also, how you can select those breach width and breach depth and breach side slope and breach development time. So considering those governing criteria, we have considered these dam breach parameters. And this volume, what we estimated that for Raften Glacial Lake, its volume was 13.6 MCM. Top breach width we have considered 60 meter, breach depth we have considered 20 meter, and breach size slope we have considered 0.5 horizontal is to 1. And what you are seeing, these are the GLOF hydrograph at the lake location. Then GLOF hydrograph, what you are seeing in the red color, that is 84 kilometer downstream of the lake location. What you can see from something around 4100 cubic, now it is 1800 cubic at 84 kilometer downstream. At project location at Puna Sangchu, that's coming 1400 cubic, something around, that is 108 kilometer downstream of this Raft Range glacial lake. So how this attenuation is taking place. Then these are the travel time, what you have found, around 2 hours 30 minutes it will take to reach up to Punakha, and up to from lake location, and till projects it will take something around 3 hours 50 minutes or 4 hours. Now another glacial lake, that Luge Glacial Lake, when we considered, then we for this estimated volume was 24 mcm, and these were the breach parameter. And what we have found in this case, if this lake is bursting, that the volume this peak will be of the order of 5400, and near the project side it will be something around 2100 cubic. Then this is the this travel time estimate. Then we have considered the combination of both raft range and but if both these two glacial lakes are bursting together, then the combined volume was of the order of 53 mcm, and the peak will be at that location of the order of something around 11,000 cubic, and at 108 kilometer downstream near the project site, it will be of the order of something around 4600 cubic. So based on that, this was the was considered a most critical scenario for this project, because this was a very important project, 1200 megawatt project, and you have to consider all the safety parameters for this project. So some 4600 cubic GLOF was considered for this project. And apart from this design flood, what we are considering design flood means the flood due to rainfall. Apart from that, and other 4600 cubic allowance of the flood has been given for this project as a GLOF also, and the spillway capacity has been decided accordingly. And this is the final GLOF hydrograph for the project. So with this, I would like to conclude key for the point of resilience, what we can do. So an inventory of glacial lakes has been prepared by Central Water Commission in association with the NRSC, and lakes having the surface area of more than 50 hectares are being monitored through satellite imageries by CWC. Then glacial lake formation is a continuous process, and their bursting mechanism is of cyclic in nature. Hence, GLOF estimate is essential for infrastructure projects located in such subbasins. As per CWC guidelines for the preparation of detailed project reports for river valley projects, GLOF study is essential in such subbasins. But for the river valley projects, it is being considered, but I am not I have information whether for designing the bridges, etc., whether the people are considering these GLOF floods or not, because that is one of the, but through this presentation, I would like they should also consider, and even for deciding the road formation level, because one such study was carried out by me. I cannot tell about that, but it was carried out by me, in which the road formation level was decided considering the normal flood and GLOF both. Though the glacial lake outburst flood peak may be very high magnitude at its source, its attenuation will be quite significant. Attenuation means how this flood will get mitigated once it is traveling along the downstream valley. Quite significant at the flood wave travels through the downstream valley. The GLOF peak at any location will depend upon its riverine distance from its source. The high sediment load associated with the lake outburst flood may bring the significant change in the river morphology up to few kilometers from its source. You must have seen what happened in the Chamoli flood. This NTPC project Pandey is completely silted now. In year 2013, this Vishnu Prayag project was completely silted. So that is because of very high sediment load associated with such type of event, and also in the reservoir bed for the run of the river schemes. Then identification of the potentially dangerous glacial lakes, hanging glaciers, and their regular monitoring through imagery, satellite imagery are essential, along with the transboundary coordination. Here, transboundary coordination is very important, because if you see here, most of the glacial lakes, if you consider from India point of view, that is lying in the Tibet region. So that transboundary coordination, and even if something happening in the Bhutan, its implication is going to happen in India also. So a very good transboundary coordination is essential here. Then hooters at salient locations to forewarn the flash flood, like for Sikkim, at some locations because of this Lonak glacial lake existence, and it's basically very potential dangerous glacial lake category, that hooters they have installed at certain locations. Whenever some such flash flood is going to happen, at least this hooter will just it will give a siren, and people in the downstream area, they should be they should get alerted. Now, acoustic sensors for monitoring the glacier cracks propagation, because what happened in Chamoli, glacier crack was there. So acoustic sensor for monitoring the glacier lakes, propagation for vulnerable glaciers, and data transmission through Earth station that maybe thought of. Then inclusion of disaster. This is also a very important aspect, that inclusion of disaster management aspect in school curriculum that should be made. And in Himalayan village, local people should be not every time you cannot get the help from outside, so the local people should be trained for the disaster management aspects and provided with essential toolkits required in case of emergency. Then for designing the infrastructure projects such as roads, bridges, RVP, etc. in Himalayan sub-basins with glacial lakes, growth should also be considered along with the relevant design flood. Sluice spillway with large gates should be provided for upcoming projects in order to safely pass the globe as well as sediment associated with the globe. High performance concrete to check the abrasion against silt or boulder. Then iron sheets may also be used in sluices, glacis, and around the piers. With this, I am finishing my presentation here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Roy. This is an amazing and excellent presentation. I mean, the presentation itself is quite a bit of, it raises the bar of our understanding, and I get a sense of how serious this phenomena that seem to be occurring in rare instances, but it also tells us how well we need to be prepared to deal with this and then build certain kind of resilience. And I have no sense of how we can go ahead it. I mean, as you do say, I think early warning systems and other kind of scenario building and prepare for the possible surges like this and flash floods like this. But I think it looks like the problem is a much bigger, and I want to open this for question and answer session, but I don't see many questions and answers. In fact, not any at all in this space, question and answer. I can understand why it is. It is partly because perhaps it's quite technically complex and also it's quite challenging. But I do have a question. In the meanwhile, I have Mr. Ashwin Pandya, who's the Secretary General, ICID, and also former Chairman, Central Water Commission. I'm hoping that he would like to come in and share his thoughts. But in the meanwhile, I have a question for you. One, at least, you closed the talk saying that it is a transboundary problem. And I see that as a major transboundary challenge, and how much we are prepared to deal with it, at least in terms of the way the various territorial entities involved are willing to address this problem. First of all, you say that most of these glacial lakes are located in the Himalayan region, which are a transboundary problem, which requires certain kind of collective action from South Asian countries, particularly, including China, as I understand. I would like to understand what kind of conversations that are happening about dealing with GLOF at one level, from monitoring to addressing the risk of possible floods in the future. And second thing, more importantly, in fact, which is of much more closer interest for us, is that this is also a very important interstate challenge. And in that sense, it is also a transboundary challenge at a subnational level. As we have been tracking with our own understanding, but you see, one thing that immediately struck is that within post the Chamoli flood incident, the Delhi's drinking water was affected. So it is a kind of a transboundary challenge when it comes to addressing it, and it clearly impacts, at least in a fundamental way, the drinking water problem in Delhi, which is a fairly large urban agglomeration. So it's not just a problem for Uttarakhand where it has happened, it is also for other downstream states. So is there any conversation that is happening, whether it is under the aegis of CWC or other kind of institutional space, how the impacts could be addressed as an interstate or a federal problem, federal governance problem. So if you could address it, I see that there is another question here. But after that, I might request Mr. Ashwin Pandya to come in and share his thoughts about it. But if you could please respond to this.
Yeah, certainly, certainly. As far as this coordination regarding GLOF is concerned, so with the government of Bhutan, because in government of Bhutan, a number of projects are coming, and government of India is completely our Central Water Commission through WebCos and all those. We are uh, quite involved. So already this data are flood during the flood period, data is being transmitted with the Bhutan. Bhutan government is also providing the data to government of India, and we are also sharing our data with government of Bhutan. With the China, we are having the transmission or the data sharing during the monsoon months. Okay, but during the lean period, during the non-monsoon months, we don't have any such data sharing mechanism. And seeing this Chamoli incident, which occurred during the month of February, so we have to consider such type of aspects also, because glacial lake failure, GLOF events may occur during the lean month. Most of the GLOF events are occurring during the monsoon month, but during the lean months also they may occur. So regarding that, yes, we have to think, we have to uh, uh, discuss with our neighboring countries. Yeah, we have to go for the data sharing of any flash flood even during the lean months also. Uh, Regarding interstate challenge, yes, interstate challenge we all know, but as far as the things are related with the disaster or such type of flash floods, so in that, I think already through NDMA, all the agencies are getting involved. So that mechanism is already existing, and it is not a new one. It is right from the Parechu Lake outburst, in which government of Himachal Pradesh, even what will be implication on Bhakhara Dam, and Central Water Commission with NDMA, NRSA, Survey of India, GSI, everybody was involved. And in present Chamoli incident also, because the team is having all the interdepartmental coordination, good coordination. So regarding such type of, because of this NDMA, all these things are possible.
Thank you. So on this issue of transboundary coordination, I was hoping that Mr. Pandya could share some of his thoughts, but in the meanwhile, I see there is a question. Sir, are you available there?
Yeah, I'm there.
Okay. So would you like to share your thoughts on this transboundary response? I know that you are involved in some of these dialogues. Besides that, after that, we will take up one question from Rishi Srivastava.
Well, yes, I mean, at the outset, I will say thank you, Rai, for putting in a very, very nice presentation, because it kind of provided a very explicit and very clear view of the GLOF phenomena. This also has actually one more phenomena also we could have covered, and that is the natural landslide dam formation.
Yes.
That also ultimately, eventually, it also ends up becoming almost similar thing like GLOF.
Yeah.
Anyway, that is that apart. The important thing about the transboundary area is that what is really needed is what is called real-time cooperation. And in the real-time cooperation, the data transmission speeds that are being presently there in the transboundary areas, especially with China, are actually very, very poor. We practically get almost like the discharge data at about like say 24 hours after that, because the channels are so convoluted that it comes there and then it goes to MEA, and then MEA passes on to MOWR and things like that. So whatever transboundary arrangements have to be there, those communication channels have to have a very strong and a very real-time response. The time available is actually very, very short. You basically have hours. Uh, Within the country, we actually need to do little more coordination and little more cooperation. Especially in these Himalayan valleys, in the steeper sloping region, we have carried out the developments, but then these developments are happening almost like independently of each other. But when such a phenomena occurs now, as you can see, the Rishi Ganga was wiped out, the Vishnugad had a problem, and all this, they were all with different agencies. Every agency was thinking that, well, whatever I have to do, I have done. But nobody had actually looked at the entire valley as such, and then the disaster management of this entire valley, because all your investments are having an impact of this kind of disasters. So when we are going to take up such activities, let's say in Arunachal, or let us say in Himachal Pradesh, or in J&K, in the upper reaches of Tavi and Chenab, we need to really work on this, that there has to be a coordinated mechanism in which all the developers will have to participate obligatorily, and provide their inputs. I mean, in the monetary terms and in the scientific terms, so that ultimately when a disaster occurs, then there is some kind of a preparedness is possible. The another next important thing is that the local communities have to be involved. Like, I mean, this is of course, I have seen this in let's say like in Austria, and even in Swiss Alps and other places. Vulnerable villages are given a very extensive kind of instrumentation network, and the local villages are actually trained about how to really observe and read these instruments and then generate warnings, to the extent that even large boulders are also given some instrumentation, so that if they start kind of slipping or something, there is a warning that gets sounded in the village, and then the whole warning system passes. We actually saw this happening in case of our this Putkal Gompa landslide dam formation, which was basically nothing but a similar kind of situation. But then the benefit was that with the help of army, it was possible to go to that lake, and while the lake was frozen, we could establish a level gauge over there, and then we could train the lamas in that Putkal Gompa to observe those readings. And eventually, when that lake dam burst, those readings actually immediately warned everybody downstream, and then practically we had no disaster in spite of a very huge lake forming and then bursting. We had practically no disaster, except of course there were low-level bridges, because these are all army areas, and you have to build temporary bridges and so many things. So those bridges, etc., got washed away for some time, but there was no loss of life. The entire Nemo Basgo project had no problems, and the entire incident actually went through in a manner that it didn't actually attract any kind of public attention. So the involvement of local communities, and then proactive instrumentation. I mean, we in this we are what is happening is that we are happening in a post-active kind of a situation, but we should be doing a little proactive kind of instrumentation and proactive kind of information channel setting up, which can then provide you with a lot of mitigation in the disaster. So for that, actually, a lot of work is still needed. We haven't really woken up to these challenges much.
Could you please extend those thoughts to share, what kind of thinking that is happening, or what is possible in terms of the necessary institutional coordination that you mentioned, sir? You said that you need to bring in the developers to, at one place, so that there is a coordination across the agencies, at the same time across various governments. What is the likely possibility? I mean, at least what is happening at the moment in terms of that kind of coordination? or just non-existent?
Right now, probably nothing much is happening. Unfortunately, I mean, right now the hydro development which was there has not really picked up the pace, and it has gone in some kind of hiatus. So that is one of the problem. But I think that enough amount of teeth exists with the Disaster Management Act, and under Disaster Management Act, some kind of a government should take a proactive sort of an attitude, and then implement these things, because then it's a simple question of asking the developer to provide for certain things, and developer will have to provide if he has to clear his project. For
Right,
existing projects, when you have an agreement, you can say that these are the things which are needed, and they will have to provide.
right, right,
But this coordination is very much necessary.
right. Well, there is a question here from Rishi Srivastava, which is about, in view of such outbursts, I feel the provision should also be kept in the dead and live storage of downstream projects. This is quite a fairly, technical question, I guess. For those existing projects, there should be adequate provision for dead and live storage, or existing or otherwise even proposed project, at least in this region. I think that's what he meant, to accommodate the incoming silt load resulting from such breaches, as this will also affect the performance of the project. So,
Yeah,
what are your thoughts on it?
I do agree. I do agree with his suggestion. Yes, some provisions should be made in the when we are planning the projects in its dead and live storage for such type of incidents. I do agree.
No,
So,
I will add to this.
all right,
What is happening is that these projects, which are there, they are actually in such steep terrain that you do not have feasibility of providing a very large storage in the first place. So then making this extra space in there will actually result in extra submergence, which will take them towards a difficult area in the environmental side, because already those submergence areas are very tightly controlled because of the sensitivity from the ecology point of view. So what is really required is that if you have a good pre-warning system in place and you have proper design in place, that means you must have low-level outlets, practically at sitting at the
on the bed,
bed
on the
level,
bed, yeah.
bed levels, and with the intelligent operation of those outlets, we should be able to conserve some of the capacity. As far as the storage reservoirs like Tehri is concerned, well, I mean, you won't be able to do that. But then for that, I mean, it is also possible to really provide for some storages in the live in the dead storage area. But for the most of the ROR projects, it will not be possible. That will be very difficult.
Yes, sir. Because in ROR projects, we are also telling the same thing. We have to go for the big size of sluice spillway. Yeah, that is the must. But yes, for storage projects like, suppose if even Siang is coming someday, the projects like Thierry, then we can consider some extra provision for such type of floods too.
Actually, there is also a possibility that we should actually consider what is called sacrificial projects or sacrificial developments. Like, say for example, when we have constructed Coal Dam. Coal Dam is technically a sacrificial reservoir. Coal Dam is supposed to now rest most of the silt over there, and then only, I mean, even the spillway that is called, it's called a decanting basin. Not even it's not actually called a spillway.
Where is this located, sir?
Upstream of Bhakra,
Okay.
and then it is added to the storage of Bhakra.
Mhm.
So for large projects like Siang and all, we will need to consider these kind of things also.
So you are saying that it is a structure, these are structures which are sacrificial, that's the way you put it.
Yeah.
These are to reduce the risks for the downstream projects. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
And also possibly attenuate the flood impact.
Of
Is
course,
that
it may attenuate a little bit, but we won't be able to do much. But all the same, at least because of that resilience, some of the silt, etc., will be trapped.
okay?
Large boulders and other things can be trapped, which may also help in stabilizing the banks at that level and don't create some kind of cascading slides.
Right. So I think just quickly, one more clarification for Mr. Rai. Could you, those Tapovan and Rishiganga projects that are pretty much washed out now, have they been provided or otherwise they designed, did it consider the scenario of possible loft burst or floods?
I think for Tapo one, it must have been. I have to check that. But for Rishi Ganga, because these 15 megawatt, 10 megawatt, those projects are not coming to Central Water Commission. Whenever the projects are being submitted to Central Water Commission, so we make it sure that if it is in that area where the glacial lakes are present, then growth study should be carried out. Those projects which are not submitted, we don't know whether they considered. As per our guideline, it should be considered, but whether it has been considered or not for Rishi Ganga, that I have a big doubt.
Okay. Well, I don't have questions, but I have one.
Srinivas, I had an interesting conversation with one of our friends in Environment Ministry recently, and then this issue was had also come up.
Okay.
Actually, when these guidelines were being done, at that time also I had objected to the Ministry of Power, NCA, that you cannot really look at merely the capacity of the power generating capacity. You have to basically look at the civil engineering part of that particular project.
Right.
So I mean, I also still have a feeling that apart from this kind of default waiver, there has to be a kind of a minimal kind of a examination and the disaster resilience of such projects have to be built in the detailed project report, and that cannot be linked with the capacity.
Okay.
So that's an area which needs some extra work in the government side.
Right. So basically, these waivers were given on the basis of capacity, but not on the basis of location. In the sense, like when you are locating these projects in such a fragile region with those kind of risks that we see, we don't have adequate measures to deal with these risks. Is that what you're saying, sir?
Yes, that is based on the capacity only.
Right. Okay. Well, we don't have any other questions, but we have one Mr. Rajaram who wishes to speak out. Can I ask my team to elevate him as a panelist so that he can come in and speak? So you can unmute yourself and speak.
Sir, thank you, sir. In fact, sorry, sir, I'm logged with some different name. I'm Dorji from Central Water Commission.
Okay.
First of all, I'm sorry for that, sir.
No, welcome, Mr. Dorji.
Yeah, I will.
We were wondering who is this Rajaram. So
sorry, sir. In fact, sir, Pandya sir has just discussed about the Phumthal Gonpa. Very interesting. I was associated with that incident. And what I did during that time, first I see what is the total communication network infrastructure with them downstream of that particular blockage. Then I got 3-4 these satellite phones. One is of that Gonpa. Now, as Mr. Rai has also intimated to have a interaction with the local, when I talk to those local lamas, they are not able to speak Hindi. Fortunately, being I Buddhist, those people were also Buddhist. I talk to them in my local dialect. Then they understand. Now, very beauty is the day when the breach came, I called them incidentally, and within 1 hour earlier, before my calling, the breach was happened. When I called them, they were crying. Maneka, what happened? Sir, your instrument has washed away the automatic water level recorder, and water has come up to this level. Now see, when second time I called the SDM Zanskar, He was not knowing at all what happened in the upper reaches about the breach. I told him locate the wave and you issue instruction to downstream to stop the movement. Now coming to my second incident, like Parchu, same day thing we did. I was executive engineer at Shimla when this incident happened. Before that, we installed a automatic water level at Sumdo, and I trained army official and ITBP official. I had one day full with them. I told them how you can have the live data, and above all, physically, because they are staying, they are camping very close to that river. You have to see the level of the river. If there is change in level, you intimate us. And luckily there, what happened, the ITBP commandant, Mr. Pundir, I remember literally he got President Award also for this event. He rang up me, Dorji, there is a shift in tent across the border. What may be the reason? I straightway told that may be the threat. That's why they are shifting their tents in upper reaches. And second day again, then he told me they are going still in higher elevations. And fortunately, and the same night, there was a small wave and our instrument at Sumdo washed away. Morning, that was Sunday, I remember. Morning, I got a call from satellite from phone from ITBP. Sir, this happened. When I checked my ground station, how the level behaved at that station, he said, sir, around 1 o'clock, there was a wave. After that, the atmospheric pressure level is coming to my system. I immediately recognized that there was some peak past yesterday night, and the army input that the tents are going up. These were all considered, putting together, we realized something is going to happen. And next day morning, we had this flood in Indian territory. Now coming to this Chamoli, very interesting also here also. On 4th, there was a 3rd IMD director told me, Dorji, there is a disturbance because I belong to a place very close to border. My village is 3,000 meter MSL from MSL at 3,000 MSL meter. He told me, Dorji, there is a disturbance which will affect on 3rd and 4th. Luckily, 3rd there was nothing.
3rd and 4th of February.
February, sir, before this incident. And 4th, we got a very heavy snowfall. That too is in very short span. Morning 10:30 started till 5 o'clock. There was no movement in Shimla. All was blocked. My wife was a doctor. I called her. She said, Dorji, we are not able to move vehicles because everything is jammed now. Nothing is possible to, we have to only walk to reach our respective destination. Then I again talked to director IMD Maneka. Now you tell me this 3rd, there was nothing, 4th happened. Now what is the situation of WD? He said, Dorji, this WD has gone towards Nahan, Sirmaur district. Because I was interested to know, because it is moving towards my side, because I was, when this Kedarnath happened, I was there in my native place. It was a huge disaster in that area also, because so heavy snowfall, lot of water content, full of water. So next day morning, when again we have a discussion, he said, Dorji, it was around a half-feet snowfall at Haripur Dar. And Haripur Dar is very close to Uttaranchal. And when I compare the temperatures, Shimla temperature was around 2 and Haripur Dar temperature was 7 that time. And after 2-3 days, this thing happened. So my point is, because there was a rainfall and there was a snowfall and there was an increase in temperature also, because Mr. Rai has explained very nicely about this avalanche and glacier, because I belong to that area only. Through my life, I've seen avalanches only. Surrounding my village, we are having every year 1 or 2 avalanches. And there is a common identified area where we are supposed to get an avalanche after every snow. So here also, because the glaciers are what? These glaciers are the outcome of the avalanches. After avalanches and the deposition of these avalanches, one by one, layer by layer, and this we are getting the glaciers. Now, above the avalanches, if the glacier, if there is a fresh avalanche, one of the photographs Mr. Rai has shown, it is clearly visible. The glacier is the color of glacier, and the fresh avalanche color is complete white. These avalanches come move above the glacier, and these goes into the lakes. The water contained in the lakes all is being absorbed by these avalanches, because avalanches are flats, and this water is complete absorbed by the, and the water further siphoned to the avalanche to the glacier. The glacier and the avalanche can hold water up to some limit. When they are 100% saturated, they will come out, and if lake size is small, automatically we have to get the breach and other thing. For this, I will give one very interesting thing. In my native village, 2-3 years back, avalanche stopped river Satluj for 2-3 minutes. Avalanche stopping river Satluj in winter. After 3 minutes, when all the avalanche which stopped the river got saturated, that there was a breach. The lake was formed. Lake water along with the avalanche, the slush, it comes down. So this is, I wanted to share. There was something in Chamoli case also, this issue of temperature and snowfall due to that western disturbance, as we need to see, sir.
Yeah, that's, thank you, Mr. Dodge. In fact, that kind of look, talking about this kind of events with that kind of local familiarity is extremely useful. I mean, I can imagine why, I mean, I wonder why this kind of understanding, I mean, the kind of local versus the at a larger scale happenings, why this is not connected. But as you say, in other instance, like the first, I don't know, I didn't get the exact pronunciation, but
Bhuktal Gonpa, sir. Bhuktal Gonpa,
right.
sir. And if I remember, Pandya Saab was the first man to whom I called. Man, sir, there's a breach. He said, sure. Yes, sir. I'm 100% sure.
Right. Okay, but unfortunately, no. One of the complaints you may say that people like us have is that it's only between you and Pandya sir, and I don't see a single documentation that is available for people like us to understand. First, at least it's a good practice in that sense, but also the challenges involved in dealing with this kind of risks. I think that itself is a kind of disservice if it is only remaining with you and Pandya sir. You need to figure out a way of putting down some of these practices, good practices, in the public domain.
Sir, I will see, sir. We have written one letter. With the help of commander of the PRO that time, we have written a paper also, because he was at the ground. I was because coordinating with the agencies. So he said, Dorji, why not we'll have a paper where we will explain and this issue. And one more issue I want to flag here, because I belong to the hilly area, because we are quite often having this, we are facing the damages, as Mr. Rai has nicely intimated, because the road level, what I have observed during in the hills, because the construction of road very along the river is very easy from construction point of view, but the keeping in the present situation and damages, or the possibility of damaging this infrastructure, road infrastructure and bridges during these kind of floods is 100% possibilities there. Same will happen in the Phuktal, and people start talking why you have not blast during the winter. That issue also came. And blasting during the winter in that area is very dangerous, because when you will go for blast, may possible that a lot of avalanches may trigger, which will cause more damaging. So that was not taken whatsoever the senior officer taken decision that time. But that was one thing, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Dorji. In fact, ISMOD blog that has been put out after 2 weeks, it's trying to explain this event of Chamoli flood, does acknowledge the western disturbances, the significant snowfall in the western parts. I think that must have, I think they put it, I hope that it is in the order, but they put it clearly as one of the factors that would explain this Chamoli incident. But the other two factors are also nothing less in contributing to this increase of these risks of gloves, which is obviously the increasing temperatures within these regions, which they share the data about, which primarily is because of the climate change and global warming, whatever you might want to call it. And the other one, obviously, the other factors, several other factors, which includes developmental interventions. I think we need to sort of, at one level, certainly, the kind of coordination that is necessary between agencies like IMD and Central Water Commission or other state level water resources departments is one of the critical things that we can definitely address, if I may say. But on the other hand, the impact of climate change in the glacial retreats and the necessary monitoring to keep apprising the criticality of these glacial incidents, possible glacial incidents, is something that we need to address over time. Well, what we have is only questions for you, because some of you who are speaking are from Central Water Commission, which is the federal agency that should be looking at these issues. Whether that kind of monitoring is happening, are we equipped to basically come out with a reasonable early warning systems so that these could be addressed. The structural response, as you talk about, whether it is locating sluice gates at the lowest level, at the bed level, those are response methods in a different category. But creating both technological solutions for providing early warning systems, at the same time generate institutional responses in terms of coordination across agencies and as well as coordination with communities to reduce the casualties and adverse impacts, is something that could be possible. I hope that eventually we will be moving towards that. And with that hope, I'd like to thank Mr. Rai again for sharing this very important presentation. And then hopefully we might organize another conversation after your visit, and with a refined thoughts, perhaps to share further about how we will be addressing these kind of risks eventually in the future. Thank you so much. And thank you also, Mr. Pandya and also Mr. Dorji, for coming in and sharing their thoughts on this very important issue.
Sir, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Raj. So nice, wonderful.
Thank you, sir.
Right, sir.